So, to introduce me first a bit, my name is Ndayé Kouagou and I'm an artist, surprise. And I work with text. I'm a writer, but because I like things to become something more than just text, I bring my text into different spaces, that is video or installation and performances. You're here in my latest production called Heaven's Truth for the Collezione Maramotti, and it's a project that I don't really know what to say about because it's so fresh for me that like it's not, I think like if you come back to me in 3 months, I'll have a really precise description of what it means and what it is, but for now it's too close to personal for me to be able to have like a perfectly constructed definition of it. You know that it's not really talking about anything special. It's a bit of a mess, but there is a reason for that. Is I like this way of processing information that the younger generation have. We've been fucked up by Instagram and TikTok, so we go from one thing to the other really quickly. We go to the other to ourselves, and this perpetual movement of not really being able to focus. So there is a lot of that in this one. So the beginning, here, the life of these four, Pudding, Pim Pim, Puda, and Pochi. They're my friends now. I spend so much time with them. So that's not the first time I use these characters. They also exist in a performance called Four Dogs and a Plum. But I love them so much in the performance, I decided to give them a new life in an exhibition. So we go from them being alive to most of them being dead and one of them pissing on the others. So this part of the story is about rejection. What I'm focusing on about rejection is the reason is vague. You watch the story, you don't really understand why Pochi is rejected, and that's just a reflection of most of the reason why people are rejected. They're not valid. So the first part of it's like trying to give some love to myself as like a little rejected kid and trying to make it a story that is more fun and cute. And I saw that I will be developing this topic when I kept writing, but then it moved into something totally different that you saw, and that's where we come back to the focusing and trying to have one topic and just not being able to keep writing about the same thing and moving into different spaces. But also I think that there is something good about this moving from one topic to the other, because then you realize later that there is a link in between these things, and it can give you a deeper understanding of who you are and how we function. Yes, that's a broad introduction to the work.
I feel like you're like talking about how like this is like a way for you to like deal with being rejected like as a kid, and I wonder like, do you feel like most of your work that you produce is like driven like internally of like it's doing something for you, or do you feel like that you also consider an external audience? Like, are you trying to like do something for other people, or is it more of a and not necessarily like that there's like an either or?
I think the reason I started sharing my writing is I wanted to know if what I was feeling was shared by others. So when I try to soothe myself, it's not just me, it's like all the people who went through what I describe. So no, it's not just a selfish, it will have no interest, I think. That's why also it's like disconnected from me. I mean, I write the story, I choose it, but I'm not in it. I mean, the character is played by me, is not really me, you know, so it's, but we'll come back to that in the next room, but yeah, it's not just me.
Is it first the text and then it fills up the space, or do you first think about the space and kinda then about the text that will fill it up? So in terms of like writing space writing, since you move different media, like in which order does it work for you? You always start with the text?
So yeah, it's a good question. I don't think about the space. I don't think about the form when I write. I just write, and then I have like let's say a lot of smaller text, and then I try to bring them together, or I start from a shorter text and try to make it longer. But no, I never think about exhibition or performance work. It's just text. And then the game is, and for me, that's the game of contemporary art, to how can I give a life to this text? And that's why so it's always different. I mean, I say always. It's changing a bit since I started this exercise of bringing my text into spaces. So no, it's the other way around.
I guess on the subject of text, I was interested in your relationship with language because it's so involved with your work. And I guess just like your personal history and relationship with language, because your work is primarily in English, but like you're based in Paris, right? And like we're in Italy right now. So like how you sort of operate in a multilingual sphere, but in like, and also your like personal history with language, I guess.
So it's filmed, so I have like a really smart answer, like an explanation where it's like a choice because I know English is used by many people, but the truth is I've always been writing and I was for a long time ashamed of my writing because in French, I don't know if it's the same for when it's your own language, but it's a bit cringy, you know, because I was writing about love a lot and I was like, oh my God, if anybody see this, like I'd rather die than let anybody read it. So at some point I was living in London and I moved my writing into English and it was a bit like away from me. And then I realized, ooh, it's kind of it's a good way of, I can keep writing and I don't have the feeling of this cringiness of French. And also, I think French is cringy for me because writing came from literature with like really, you know, classical, and so I think when I'm writing in French, I'm kind of imitating the style and there is a poetry vibe, and you know, and I didn't want that to be shared with the public. So when I moved to English, because I was more limited in the way I was writing, I had to find ways to say what I wanted to say without the form and without a big vocabulary. So that's why in my writing and then there is a lot of repetition because I'm trying to get to a point, and it became a form, and that became kind of my signature. But that's why it's in English. And also, like, I'm glad I had this feeling about French because it's way more easy to share a practice in English than a French text-based practice.
You mentioned that you chose English and you have a bit of a distance, like speaking 4 languages, can totally relate. And then the characters, you also said like that you were performing, it's not you being the character. Why the distance? Like you choose to be the narrator for the objectiveness of it, like for the observation. Like why precisely this position, like on the outside and not inside the story, one of the characters?
I will answer that question when we move to the next room. So let's move to the next room. So also linked to your question, so I don't want things to be about me because I'm a limited person. I want as many people as possible to relate to what I say, to what I produce. But if it's just me, I'm socially so defined that it will limit the number of people I can reach. So I had to find a way to use my body because that was the only one I was available at first, and create something that is not just me, but can be somebody else. And so more people can relate to it. So the first tool I had was to change my voice.
Let me explain this to you. When you die, you end up in court.
So masculine body, female voice. We lose the gender question. And then if you've seen in the other works that, not this installation, but the older one, the character doesn't even have a name. This one still doesn't have a name. You know nothing about the character. This one is the first one where there is a real identity behind the character, but even still it's not mine. I had to think about, okay, who this narrator is going to be. It has to be something I can talk, like a position where I can talk from, but it has to be a situation that's different from mine. So I went to, I had this show at the Bureau Stedelijk in Amsterdam, and I met some people there, and I was like, oh wow, the Black experience is really similar to the Black French experience there. And I was like, maybe I can create a character from there because I can talk from this position. It's not mine, but it's similar enough for me to be able to talk in their name in a really limited capacity. So that's why this character is from Amsterdam. So it's the same I mean, it's a really similar trajectory of immigration for the parents. I say the parents are Surinamese and Dutch, so the goal was to be able to talk from another position without stealing a voice and in a really realistic way. So it's me if my parents moved to Amsterdam instead of France.
Are from Amsterdam, in a middle-class
But it's not me.
household. My dad is Dutch and my mom is Surinamese. I have to admit, life was quite easy for me. I went to high school and university
I
in
would like to
Amsterdam.
ask a question about the four characters. Can you say a bit more about them? And also, I think it's very nice how they're dressed and how different they're dressed. And do you think that reflects like their personality in a way?
Yeah, so the characters, the way I was building them is I knew from the beginning that none of them will have a voice. So if you take away a voice, all you have is gesture and body. So I'll have to have as much energy, identity, with just body and movement. So I went to look into different type of people. I wanted somebody really shy, somebody who's like out there, and somebody a bit smaller, like different type of people. And so I had to build them starting from that position. So first I found the people, and then with my stylist, Clara Ziegler, we had to dress them to try to emphasize their movement behavior. And I think it was an interesting exercise to think about creating somebody without a voice. Without a voice, without a name, I mean, they have a name, but like without a real, it's really limited what I can give about them, but they have to feel alive. And it was kind of an answer to the work called Here and Elsewhere, the video that sits in the... Because this was the first time I gave a voice to people, and it was such a difficult exercise that I was like, okay, this time, Bimia was a bit pretentious with this one. I'm going to come back to just me doing the creating the voice, and then have people existing, but without voices. And also one of the inspiration for that was the photocomics system, because if you think about it, it's a real, so it's, a picture with a text that describes what's happening. And it's interesting because you can change a sentence. So you can shoot something and say like, you have to play like you're afraid, and then you can do a text that says like the person was happy, and then, so I like this kind of control over narration that you have, and how you can create different narration with the same picture. And I know it's going to happen in the future. So there is this version, but I know I will make different version because I have a lot of, a big reserve of video and stuff that we shot. So maybe I'll do another story with the same images. And I like this. I think there is a bit of, I kind of like to control. I'm not a control freak, but like just before this level. And you can see it in many ways in the way I build exhibition. Like you are forced. I mean, I invite you to follow, my rhythm. I like to take away freedom. Sounds so bad when I say it like this, because then people can focus on what it said and not on, trying to navigate and that comes from my. I want to be nice to the people who came. Like it has to be, because what I'm going to talk about is not simple. I want the rest to be simple.
I'm just going to go back to the language questions because I find them quite interesting. You mentioned something about subjectivity being inevitable when it comes down to language. So if you're talking about heaven's truth, is your use of language meant to reveal truth or to state that inevitably it's impossible to pin it down?
I don't think I'm trying to pin down the truth. I think the main exercise in my practice is at the end to create like to create a truth together, and to realize. I think it's a simple. My practice exists for one reason. That's one many reasons, but that's one of them. I was going to school. I was hearing a truth. Going home, hearing a truth, and they were different, and none of them were lying. So I realized that that's the way things are, and sometimes even more now, the truths collide and it's not working. So what I do is I create spaces where we build truth together. So I'm not giving you any answer, but I show you that look, if you take out identity and a lot of things, we are similar, what happens if we build from that point of view, not from a really defined position. Does that make sense? Yes. I bet I didn't answer your question.
No, it's good. I can have another one. Yes. So in the same kind of round. But then if we're talking about like the language that you're using to guide people through rooms, how do you construct a language that at the same time resists authority, but also is clear enough to guide people through? How do you find balance between that?
There is always somebody who asks me this question, and I'm like, no, the opposite, because I don't really have an answer to that. And I think it's, the same way, so I started writing this story. I wrote the dog story a few years ago. Then a year ago, I wanted to, finish it. And I started to write all this. And I was like, it would be funny to project what happened when they die, so I was, inside of my computer, with like a blank page, and I was free to imagine what happened after you die. And I was like writing, I was like so excited, and then I read myself, I was like, I just recreated the same fucking world we live in. So that's where I realized how limited I was and how used to the system I was. So the form of authority is part of the world I live in. So I recreate it it's not ill-mannered, it's just, that's the way things are. So I'm just, I do it because I was raised in that way. I live in the world that is that way. So, and that's why I'm like kind of pointing in this work is the lack of imagination that we are going through right now. Like, can we imagine we suck so much as like a race that like we're going to do fascism again? Like, really? Like we just did it. It didn't work. It was lame, and we redo it because we're not able to project anything else. And I think it's I'm just like same victim of making things the way they've always been. It's not real, but like that's a feeling we have, and that's the only system we know. So I'll be a bit authoritarian in a way, giving order, telling you where to go and what to do, but trying to give you a freedom inside of that. So it's and that's kind of my my fight is I'm trying to give freedom inside of this limited space where I control everything.
I noticed that all your works were on little wheels, and I was wondering if it was on the purpose to moving them around during maybe the exhibition also to have some freedom of movement, or are you planning on letting them every time on the same case? It sounds really dumb.
No, it's not dumb. It's a good question. No, because it go back to what I said before. I can create different stories with, but it's more. I think the wheels. So I work with somebody who helped me to production side, and I was like, the idea is like I'm going to make this character and then I'm going to read a different story, and it was like, let's put them on wheels, and I was like, but I'm not going to move them during the show, and it was like, but yes, but if they're on wheels, you bring the idea of them being able to move and that the story can move, and I was like, oh, that's so smart, and so now they're on wheels. Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of times that your body is a bit of limitation, that's why you use it just in the video, and you don't want to use your own character in here. And the characters themselves, when you were choosing clothes, you mentioned that, now they're limited to gestures, body language, clothes. But then there is the, not abstract, but the language, as opposed to the limitations of physical bodies. You have like bold, dead, cold, fun, the bold words, and like looking at them looks like a billboard, a poster, something. Like, why particularly, or how did you come to this presentation of text? It looks almost like as if it's an advertising advertisement, even though it's not like in this screaming thing at you, like dogs will be dogs. Sometimes fun, like some sort of proclamation, like why this text? Because when you write it differently, it's a different text. Mm-hmm. Then you sort of deconstruct it. How do you deconstruct it? Like,
no, the truth is all this is made by somebody who works in advertisement. Axel Peltange was my visual art director for text. But I think there is a Volkswagen Polo in the show. So like everything that is in my work visually is part of the visual public domain. That's a space that I really appreciate because it has no identity. That is not owned by anybody. The Volkswagen Polo is owned by 1 million people. And I love this kind of space because then you can exist in a different way. I mean, that's the dream of modernism, but like, I'm doing a fucked up version where it failed so hard that now we don't care about it and we can do whatever we want around it, and that's why I'm doing with the text. And I always try to bring as much recognizable element in my practice. I had to do a research for the Volkswagen Polo. What was the most sold car in the region of Amsterdam around 2015? And then I was like, if I take the first one, it's too obvious, I have to take the third one. So now, you know, in 2015, the most sold car in the region of Amsterdam is the Volkswagen Polo.
As the French say, my trial went comme une lettre à la poste.
I know the video is a very big part of this exhibition, but do you think you tend to use video as a way of kind of making it more maybe accessible or open to people that aren't as open to contemporary art or aren't as familiar with contemporary art, are willing to be open to contemporary art?
Yes, exactly. So I started with performance. It's an obvious place of grabbing people and, like, you know, you're in contact and you know what's going to work and what's not working. And in my performance work, I was obsessed by having a practice that is approachable. But the problem when you say that is, like, people project something bad. When you say, I want it to be for as many people as possible, you know, it's going to sound like you're going to do a light show or, like, you know, like something really, without a reflection behind it. But my position is I want to trust my audience. I know people are smart. I know they can do it. If I can do it, they can do it. But I had to think about a way of bringing them into it with something that is not violent to them. So video was the first thing. I mean, performance was the first part, and then video. And I had to keep, one of the tools I use is having this character scale 1. People feel confident when there is somebody. And
Hey.
I know it's fake,
Hello.
but it works. Like,
I'm glad
some
you're
people
here,
watch my video and then they
because I have a
come
lot
to
to
me
tell you.
and they start talking to me like we know each other. I'm not like, and I'm like,
For
I've
anything
never met
else,
you.
and for everything to be
It's
clear,
not, I mean, it's me, but
I
it's a
need to
video and I
tell
was
you
not there, you know. So yeah, that's the one of the reasons I chose video. And also, like, I think about duration and the form of the video, because for me, when I go to a museum and there is a small explanation, say like video work, 50 minutes length, I'm like, no, I'm not gonna sit for 50 minutes, you know? So I know our attention span is decreasing, so a longer video, if you cut it in shorter parts, it's easier to watch. The longest thing I've ever done in my life is the one Here and Elsewhere. And also that is also cut and made to be shown in a multi-space environment. But yes, there is a lot of way for me to be sure that people are not gonna get bored, or bored is not even a question. For me, it's more like, you know, this pretension of contemporary art. I'd like for it to not exist in my work.
I have a question about the curation, how you collaborate with the curator, given that your project kind of isn't to give out any answers and it kind of remains ambiguous, given that the curator sort of acts as a mediator between the artwork and the visitors and sort of facilitates their experience. How does that differ with the project that, you know, you come out of it not maybe having an answer?
So for this show, that's something special about the Collezione, there is no curator. Okay. So you work, there is a team that help you, but they don't want to intervene into the creation itself. And so for this time, it was kind of easy. But usually, that's what happened is some curators are going to focus on the generational aspect of the work. So they're not even going to try to jump into what I say. It's just going to be like a practice informed by social media, and kind of don't really like that. But it's a way for them to not touch this no question. And also, like, they're going to use the same, trying to open the reflection type of, like, a work where your thoughts are in the centerpiece of the, you know, like, kind of this. But now, because I think my work went around a bit, curators know how to use that. So it become more about, they're going to bring, like, some possibilities of question that can appear in the work and write around that. And I think for me, that's the best way of talking about my work. It's like, I want the creator to bring their personal feeling and question into it. And because, I mean, the truth is, it's one version. It can be interesting for somebody to read, like, that's all the question that came out of this work. And then you go through it and you have like a totally different type of questioning, you know. So it's, that's what happens usually. It's, I force the creator to go personal on the project. So third part, the trial. This, for me, is the really good representation of the right now. So this character died young, wants to do politics in the next world, become a judge. And then you go through their mind and you realize the obsession is not about the job, but about how they're going to be perceived. And I think that's one of the big violence in our world right now is this obsession of how we are going to be perceived. I mean, it can be from, oh, I need to look good to, I need to never seems weak. And then, you know, the first one just going to make you somebody who go and buy a lot of clothes. The second one is going to make you a dictator. So we know there is and it's interesting for me to show that this crazy outcome is a bit in everybody, you know. We're all a bit in the way of becoming something that can be really dangerous just because we are obsessed by the way we are perceived. And this character is so like blocked into this obsession that like there is no judgment. There is no, that's like, even the judgment, they're going to let it to the decision to the person who is judged, you know, so it doesn't make sense for, but yeah, that's the third chapter.
Why is it 3 chapters, and is the story now finished, or could there be a 4th chapter added?
So the number of chapters are limited by something called the budget. Yeah, if I had twice the budget, we'll have 6 chapters, we'll have a pool, we'll have a real car. But that's also something I have to think about as an artist, like in terms of money, I'm limited, so I have to build what I can build, and then I can come back to it in different way. I can, you know, rework what I have. If the budget is limited, I can produce more. But yes, it's an open, I know my dear Pudding, Pipim and Puda are going to come back. It's like the Avengers, you know, they'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But yeah, it's a budget constraint and a space constraint also.
I was curious if you could just share with us what was the biggest challenge when trying to harmonize all of your material, from text to video to printouts to space to English language in Italy. What was the most difficult challenge to harmonize throughout everything?
It was not that difficult because, as I said, I use this common visual aspect for everything. So as long as it's recognizable as like this advertisement, postmodern, contemporary world, is going to be part of my visual language. So it's a chance for me. It's a really good system. Also, I don't do it myself. That's the other secret. I have to accept that there is things I can do and things I cannot do. So I can write stupid story, but I'm not able to create visual language that go with them. So I'm working with Axel Peltanche, and we've been developing it for years now. You know, there is some, if you look at the first work you see, and it's the last work in the show, but it's the older one, it's not exactly the same visual language as now. There is, you can clearly see like, oh, it's the same artist, but there is an evolution that is bringing the same language that I have in text at first, just limited to graphic design, into other aspects, like the car, the cutout, you know, it's using all this kind of public domain type of system and visual.
A bit of a personal question. Obviously, so this is, we'll say, social critique as to, I'll say, what the truth is, and questions are, who is to judge what is good and what is bad, and how do we as people define it? Because objectively, there are things that are morally bad, and there are things that personally are subjectively bad to each of us, and how we interpret this. And so, in your personal opinion, do you think the truth is something that we create or perform? Is it something like, as you said, that we are so worried with our appearance and how people perceive us that is when truth matters because of what we are displaying and not because it actually is something that I'll say is meaningful to us in its form?
To be honest, I don't have an answer. I think right now, personally, I'm in this position, like I'm trying to get away from the me being perceived by others to try to build a way of judging the world and to take decision, but I don't have the answer. That's why I do this. I hope that I will talk with all of you and then all give me something small. I'll give you something small and I can, arrive at a conclusion. But so far now, I don't really have an answer.
I was wondering, like, if all of us now, then later the visitors, will bring our truth here, do you still perceive it as like collision, fight, battle? Or is it more like holding space for different truths to coexist? Is it like different truths, personal truths, like to hold space? Or do you expect that it will be always like a collision, battle, or something?
I think we avoid a collision in that space because we start from the same position, that is the work and the situation. Like we all have the same information. We are all limited to what you just saw in the videos and in the installation. So I think it's not going to be collision, it's going to be co-construction but also I'm a bit of a romantic person, so that's why I say that. But also, the most critical aspect of it, I think, is how we are all defined in a really small way. Like this character, if you list the number of information you have on them, it's nothing, but it's enough for you to know how they're going to operate in the world. And I want to move past that, you're going to think that because you're just a person living in Milan and you are 24 and your parents do that. That's such a limitation in the way that we think. And then I try to, no, it's going to be pretentious. The truth is I was forced to think outside of where I started. And I realized that maybe we should all try to, move one step to the right and one step to the left. And then it's not about going to share all the truths and absorbing them and trying to, it's realizing there is difference. And then maybe it's the starting one is the question, not the conclusion.
I was doing a little bit of reading beforehand, and in one website that's talking about your bio or your work, it's like Contemporary Art Society something. They talk about how using kind of ambiguity and rhetoric and rhetorical questions how much art can change people or engender change in people. And I guess for me, what I find really interesting about your work is these questions, because I feel I think for people to change, I don't think a conclusion is helpful. And I think that I think it's we need to just perpetually be questioning. And I think what I love about your work is that it's it is ambiguous. It's enigmatic and relieving space of being uncomfortable and sitting with that, I think is really interesting. And so I don't necessarily I feel for me it kind of proves that art can maybe engender change by leaving spaces to be unanswered. And I guess I wonder for you and this kind of goes back to my first question of is this external, is this internal, but do you what would you hope out of this? Do you want to engender change in people, or are you just proposing? I don't know, I'll leave it at that.
It's the way you said it's perfect. It's this always changing and the always questioning. That's what I believe in. And to go talk about contemporary art and can it change something? So I don't have the feeling of doing contemporary art. I do stupid writing, and then these people from contemporary art told me oh, in our space you can show it, So it's impossible for me to say yes, contemporary art can change. I don't care, and it's not even a question. It's a space that can be used in many different ways, and some people can use it in a way that can bring some changes. That's more how I see it. if you know, it's contemporary art because that's where it kind of worked for me in a way. It could have been something else. I think if I was born like 45 years before, it would have been just writing, you know, just a novel type of, because, you know, the power of a book released in 79 is more than like one release in 2026. And also something that we have to think about is like the economic reality of it. So I had another job before, and I didn't like it, and I wanted to do something that our generation dream. Yeah, we're gonna develop ourselves through work, blah, blah, blah. So I wanted to work with text. And I was like, I'm gonna be a writer. And then I just Googled like, how much a writer make per year? The number was so bad, I was like, I don't wanna be a writer. So I had to think about where can my text exist? And options were, the more obvious to me at the time was contemporary art. But it could have been theater, it could have been, I mean, if you look at this, it's kind of the other video is even more like a theater play. It can be a movie, it can be whatever. It's not a real question for me. So you've seen the video, right? Yeah. It's one of my most unique video. I think I'm more obvious in this one on what I want to say. There is a directness and a violence in this one that is absent in any other of my work. And because that time comes from a time of crisis, just 2 years ago when things started to really go weird, like it was weird before, but when it went, I wrote this one and I just needed to, am I the only one going crisis right now? Like, are we all in this? So, but I don't know what to think of it now, like, because now I've calmed down, it's a bit like, the feeling you yell and then an hour later you're like, what the hell did I do that? That's that work. Conclusion, never do anything just after the crisis, wait a bit. But it was good also because I had the chance to bring other people into this. So I gave voice to other people. I wrote the voices, but still it was a way of like grabbing the things that I was seeing in the world in a really obvious way, like people who never answer the question, people who are so sure of themselves. I was tired of that. I was like, I'm gonna show them in a really ironic, stupid way, and people are going to understand that we have to change. And no, it was not received like this. I think it's the less effective of my work at the end because people watch it and they're like, people are so stupid. Like they're not part of the, and I was like, okay, so let's go back to the other way of doing, like, hey, we're together. I'm gonna tell you a nice story and then we'll conclude maybe something.
Let's jump into this promising story. But before jumping, I need to be sure to be in front of people.
I was reading this book, it was by a French writer, but I was reading it in Russian translation. Anyways, she was writing about Japan because of her Japanese origins, and she was mentioning that you cannot write about a catastrophe, which are a crisis catastrophe, in the moment. You can only realize it later with some distance in retrospect, and this sounds true to this.
It's the truest.
This one. But generally, is it also applicable to the previous chapters that we've seen, the topics? They resonate with you immediately and you immediately think of how to turn text into space, or you give it some time to cool down, to take some distance, to think, which
Well, it depends of how pretentious I was when I started the production. So for the one, I think the last part, I wrote it 3 nights before shooting it. I was because I wrote the dog story, and then I wrote the story of this unnamed character, and then I was like, wow, I love it, so cool. Oh, I'm shooting in 3 months, I have time. I went on and lived my life, and then 5 days before the shoot, I was like, fuck, I don't have the chapter 3. And I had promised 3 chapters here. So but that's also, it's different compared to that because, okay, I wrote it at the last moment, but I had so much time to think about chapter 1, chapter 2, that in my head, everything was already aligned. This one is I just sat, I wrote it on a train. I wrote it, I was so mad, like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then a month and a half later, I had this possibility to make a video. I was like, let's make a video. It's my last work. It's going to be amazing. And then I'm going to say fuck to contemporary art after that, fuck to the world, you know. Oh, that's not, I'm here. Let's move to, that used to be a more central part in my practice, but it evolved into a new way of doing the same in a different way. So the reason of all this type of work with fabrics is, so I used to work in fashion, I hated it, and it's my revenge. So now I can play with fabrics the way I want and nobody can tell me anything. You know, when you start to, I believe that you should be simple in the way you do things before complicating them. So I was like, I want to work with fabrics, I work with text, I'm going to put the text on the fabric. So like, that's what I did. And I think there is some kind of honesty about it that worked for a time, but now I think I kind of got older and grew, and then I still want to work with fabric, but how can I do differently? How do you want to do it now? So that's how I created the work that you saw in the third room with the printed leather. So it's the same for me. I went from this one to the printed leather because it's the same. I want to play with fabric and try to bring my writing practice into it. And that time it was not text, it's the faces of the character. Also the character, so you watch the video and they're all playing, dancing, blah, blah, blah. But you don't get to a point, except the one that is sad because rejected, you never get to a point of the deepness of a character. And that's something I noticed when I was producing the work, is I wanted them to slow down from this high pace, you know, they appear, they disappear, they move. So I was like, let's do a portrait of all of them, like where they are more gravely, you know, like bring them into some depth. So I was like, okay, depth, fabric, leather. And then to the same guy who had this amazing idea, Simon Gérard, about the wheels. I was like, is it possible to have like an image? And then I was like, yes, of course, you can UV print. And I was like, let's go. That's the continuation of that research with fabrics. And so it's kind of not connected, but at the end it's connected because I want this like public domain visual aspect, and fabrics is an obvious one. But the truth is that it's not because of that, it's because of my selfish dream of being a designer and playing with fabrics and yeah. And the small one, they are more personal work. I think you get to me quickly with this one than the other type of production. The reason they're here is because to go back to what I said about wanted people to, you know, the work to be approachable and people. So I want to be generous in what I offer. So I went through the exhibition and I was like, oh no, there is only one rhythm in exhibition. It's like, you're here, you move, you watch the video, you move, you watch the video. And I was like, I need to break that. I need for people to slow down in a different way than just watching videos. So I was like, okay, I need to bring longer version of my text. So that's why at the end, you know, you're going to stroll around and read this text, and it's kind of taking you out of this whole video questioning system that I created.
As I said, in the videos, it's your text, but it's in an oral form, whereas here they're written down. Is it more intimidating maybe to write it down and the people really stop to like take the time to read it and put an effort into like reading it, whether when it's a video you just like are there and maybe it's a bit more passive way to receive the text, if it makes sense?
Yes, yeah. And also, it's the only time where you'll have my text with your voice. So that's the big change. It's I'm not controlling the voice, so I'm not controlling the way you're gonna read. So it became yours more quickly, and weirdly enough, becoming yours connects to me more quickly. So I don't think there is a reason to go into the third one, because I mean, you've seen the video, I talked about it. Just to talk about it quickly, it's yeah, we talked about budget and production and all this type of. This one was an exercise. What can I do with a really limited budget? I mean, I say like it was an exercise. I had no choice. I had a limited budget and I wanted to make a video, so the writing has to be more direct. the gimmick has to be there quickly so we can go through it, conclude, and move on. That's why I ended up with a topic that is simple, that is binarity, like everything is, this divide in the world we live in, and yeah, that's the video. I've realized there are 3 things I love to bring into my work. It's coins, keys, and the last one is rock. And I know it's not present, but it's coming. It's already written. And I think I realized that it's all stuff you can have in your pocket. There is no conclusion to that. That's just what. And then I realized that my work is going to get old really quickly, because I'm sure somebody born in 2015 will never have a coin in his pocket. So I need to find a new something else.
Just for the whole exhibition as a whole, I understand it's tied to the Cinema Fotografia festival, and the theme is
Of
ghosts
the
and
moment.
yeah, and I guess I wonder how did you place all of this within those considerations? I had a real listening.
When I got the name of the festival, I was like, yeah, it's a fluke that the both are that related, and also it's the first time I worked with photography, and it was not even a choice. I wanted to do the dog story with this system of cutout and the printed face on leather and all this. So it just happened. And also I've never thought about working with photography before. When the festival came, talked with them, that's where I realized, oh, it's photography also, I didn't even think about that what I was doing now was photography. For me, it was just I can do 25 images per second. It would be way more easier to do just one, but I've learned it's not true. Photography is fucking difficult. Moving images is more, it's heavier to do, but it's simpler, because if you want to say 2 things, you can do the movement from one to the other. If you have 1 images, you have to find a way to express everything with that still frame, and it was a tough exercise. When we were shooting with the dogs, I was telling them you have to be you're judging, but at the same time you're unhappy, but at the same time you're judging the character and the judge, and all that with one position. They were it's impossible. So yeah, photography. Thank you.